Hey everyone, it's Monday, June 2nd. You're watching CBC News BC. I'm Benit Brach here in the Vancouver newsroom, and here are your top stories this afternoon. Well, tensions are still stacking up with Canada Post and its workers. Canada Post has rejected a request from its union to send their ongoing labor dispute to binding arbitration. Instead, the company wants the union, which represents about 55,000 of its workers, to sign its latest offer, which is calling its final offer to membership for a vote. It says arbitration would take too long and likely lasting over a year. And it wants Job Minister Patty Hadju to intervene and force a vote on its membership. Meanwhile, the union says forcing a vote would not bring lasting labor peace between the parties, regardless of the vote's outcome.
For local members, yes, of course, it's stressful because it's day to day for us. And members are struggling too at the same time, but we are prepared for whatever comes out of it.
That final offer stuck to a 14% cumulative wage hike over 4 years and using part-time staff on weekend shifts. The BC Wildfire Service is predicting increased fire behavior this month, especially in places experiencing drought-like conditions in the province's northeast. The fire causing the most concern right now is the Kiskoneta River wildfire next to the BC-Alberta border, just south of Dawson Creek. It now covers around 39 square kilometers and has prompted an evacuation order for about 70 people in the Kelly Lake area, primarily members of the Kelly Lake Cree Nation. There has been some progress in tackling the blaze this past weekend. Overall, there have been 5 new fires that started in the past day. There are now 69 active fires burning across the province. And the province has also announced a new program to help address street crime and disorder that affects businesses and communities. This is called the Community Safety and Targeted Enforcement, or CSTEP for short. And BC is allocating as much as $5 million towards this initiative that will provide police with enhanced tools and resources. Now, the head of the Hastings Crossing Business Improvement Association shared what he wants to see come out of this program.
People are being displaced away from other services and are seeking help. And I don't think we're meeting them there. And so what I would love to see as part of this funding is attachment to those social services, outreach workers going out in front of police. Right now, they're happening kind of sparingly scattered. They're not coordinated. And that's part of what we've been pushing for and really fighting for here.
The province says it will continue to support policing while waiting for results from the program before deciding what the next steps are. The family operating an ostrich farm in BC may consider trying to move the birds to the United States. Katie Pestini with Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood says it would be a last resort, but notes that U.S. officials, including Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., have made proposals to Canada about saving the birds. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says that roughly 400 ostriches must be culled because the avian flu infection at the farm was a form of mutation of the virus that wasn't seen in Canada before. The family has said the ostriches have developed herd immunity, but the CFIA says that the farm is facing a $20,000 fine to failure to quarantine and cull those birds. And that's all we have for you so far. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us. BC Today is coming up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. BC's minimum wage now sits at $17.85 per hour. That's the latest annual increase by the province. Is it enough for workers to get by? And can small employers afford the pay raise? We'll hear from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives and from the Langley Chamber of Commerce, and we'll take your calls. And the Bay's days were numbered, and now they're done. What does the closure of the Bay mean to you, and what should go into those now empty spaces? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Well, BC's minimum wage is now 45 cents higher than it was on Friday. The province's mandated increase of 2.6% brings it up to $17.85 an hour. And this wage includes resident caretakers, live-in home support workers, live-in camp leaders, and those app-based delivery and ride-hailing services as well. We're asking you, what do you make of the minimum wage increase? Do you think it's enough? Can small businesses afford the pay hike? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you'd like to email us instead, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me first is Marc Lee, senior economist at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Hello, Marc. Nice to see you.
Hi, good afternoon, Michelle.
What do you make of this increase, the fourth straight year that wages have been tied to the average inflation rate?
Yeah, well, I think first it's just important to note the role that the minimum wage plays in how we regulate the labor market. And I think the minimum wages is really important in terms of putting a floor on income that people earn in the labor market. And basically, the premise should be that if you work full-time, full year, then you shouldn't be living in poverty. As you know, we've been having big increases in the cost of living over recent years. And so I think it's important that we talk about the role the minimum wage can play in alleviating both inequality and poverty. So to that end, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that in recent years, the BC government has tied the minimum wage increases every year to increases in inflation, or the consumer price index. This is a positive because, for many years before that, the minimum wage was relatively flat, and so over time its purchasing power would erode due to inflation. And if we go back to 2019, there was a bit of a catch-up period as well. So in 2019, the minimum wage was $13.85, so a full $4 less than now. So the current minimum wage is 29% higher than that, relative to an increase in the consumer price index, or inflation, of just under 21%. So there's some catch-up that's been made in terms of the minimum wage and cost of living. The bad news is that even at $17.85 an hour, it still falls well short of what you would need to live in dignity. We do a number of different calculations on this. My colleague Aglika Ivanova has done calculations of the living wage, which generally is around couples who have children, and includes all kinds of calculations to adjust for things like childcare. By their estimates, the living wage in Vancouver would be $27 an hour. We also do calculations of what the rental housing wage, like how much you would have to earn in order to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver. And that comes out more like $33 an hour. So when you make those comparisons, it seems like there's still a lot of room for the minimum wage to go up in order to provide additional income to folks who need it at the bottom of the distribution.
And so calculating the minimum wage according to inflation as it gets closer to that 2.6%, that's the target. Is that still a useful way of calculating minimum wage, or should it be closer to the living wage, as you've been talking about?
Well, at a minimum, having the minimum wage go up by the rate of inflation over the past year keeps those workers level to where they are, but it doesn't provide for any improvement. So what we would like to see are, at a minimum, inflationary increases plus a little bit extra. And over time, we should be trying to shrink that gap. I mean, you could make the case that the minimum wage could be raised much more quickly, and I think that would actually be very popular. But to alleviate concerns from the business community, like a slower phase-in would be possible as well.
And what about when it comes to relative to the rest of the provinces? It looks like BC is at the top end of that range. So when you look at a further increase, perhaps, does that put BC out of line with the rest of the country?
Well, I think the problem is that the cost of living is so high in BC, as I'm sure everyone listening to this knows. So it makes sense that our minimum wage would be higher as a result. But it still just recognizes that, housing in particular, but, transportation, food, a lot of essentials, all of these go up year after year. And individuals or households, need to make ends meet. Even at the current minimum wage, in order to get to the poverty line, you'd have to work 53 hours per week. So, I guess that's possible if you worked 2 jobs, but that's asking a lot, I think, for people who are earning the least in our society.
And Mark, you brought up an interesting point there, saying this is the floor, right? And so when you look at the bigger context, is there an issue around how quickly people move up from the minimum wage? Like, how many people are we talking about, and how quickly do they move on to the next stage and then the next after that?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers bounce around a little bit from year to year, but, about 10% of folks in the labor market are at or close to minimum wage. If you took the living wage, that's $27 an hour I spoke to earlier, you'd find that 750,000 British Columbians earn less than the living wage. So there's still a ways to go in terms of having a more inclusive labor market and reducing the inequality that's been growing in our society over the past few decades.
Love to hear from our callers on this as well. What do you make of the minimum wage increase as of yesterday? The minimum wage in BC is now $17.85 an hour. That's up 2.6% from the previous minimum wage, and that was increased as well last year. And the province has been tying those increases to inflation, to the inflation rate. So what are your thoughts on that? Can you or people that you know who are working minimum wage, can they get by on $17.85 an hour? As you heard, given the cost of living in BC as well relative to other provinces in Canada. Love to hear from you as well if you're a small business owner. What does an increase of that 2.6% over last year, what does that mean for you? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you want to email us, we're at bctoday@cbc.ca. And Mark, as we talk about the cost of living, there's, what people are making, but there's also the increases in food, food inflation, of course, housing, they make up a lot of, what brings inflation up. And so what's being done to tackle things from that end, from the cost end?
Not that much, unfortunately. I think in terms of housing has gotten a lot more of the attention in recent years. There's been a real concerted effort on the part of the provincial government to loosen zoning regulations so that we can build, more dense housing. Sometimes when bigger developments are coming on stream, we ask that a certain proportion of those be at or below below market rates for rent so that they are more affordable. But it's challenging because simply the cost of building housing, it's expensive. You have to buy land because there's construction, there's financing costs, there's other fees that have to be paid. So housing, I think, is a really, really big piece of this. And of course, it's your sanctuary, it's your shelter. The other big one is food. And during the inflation episode that we had in 2022, 2023, some of the sources of inflation were coming due to higher energy costs and transportation bottlenecks. But we also saw a little bit of extra being taken at the till by the big supermarket chains who are then recording record profits. So I think there's a lot more we could do with things like windfall profits taxes to make sure that, when things happen, people aren't going to get charged extra. This is, I think, particularly important right now as we are looking at tariffs and counter tariffs in the trade war, and as tariffs hit and the price of food goes up, there's a potential for Loblaws or other supermarket chains to pad the prices a little bit so that they can make more money.
I have one email before I let you go. I'd love to put this to you. Scott writes, raising the minimum wage in BC is important, but we must not ignore the deeper crisis, which is youth unemployment. Young people face the highest unemployment rates in this province, and without early access to jobs, they struggle to afford post-secondary education or build experience to join the workforce. What does this mean for young people and their futures?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the caller is definitely right in terms of youth unemployment being a serious issue. I think one of the problems that we've had over the recent years is that the federal government has allowed big increases in temporary workers to come in to work those jobs, and that's put young people at a disadvantage. I think, overall, economists have looked at the impact of minimum wages on employment. Historically, a lot believe that if you increase the minimum wage, then you're just going to lead to a lot of job losses. And generally, the empirical evidence suggests that if there is an employment impact, it's very, very small, almost significant. But the total wage bill increases, the amount of money that folks making the minimum wage have to spend in the local economy goes up. Generally speaking, workers are not laid off when there's a minimum wage increase, but over time there's this dynamic aspect to it in terms of business decisions. There may be some slight increases in prices. They may try to emphasize technology in lieu of labor. But they also tend to invest more in their workers because they want them to stick around longer. There's costs associated with the turnover in the workforce. So it's a much more complicated picture. I think increases in the minimum wage are not really a substitute for something like being in a union where you have collective bargaining, and you can talk about some of the other dimensions that are affecting those workers with precarious work these days. Part-time work, limited hours, scheduling difficulties, gig work, all of these are different aspects that also affect that same workforce. And for folks who are like farm workers, for example, they're paid on a piece rate that doesn't even, the minimum wage doesn't really touch them. So there's a lot more we can do to better regulate the labor market and make sure that more money is flowing to the folks who need it at the bottom.
And when it comes to those agriculture workers, I believe that increase is in the fall. And the province says that's to ensure that crop producers won't need to adjust wages during the harvesting season. So that increase by 2.6% will come, not in the fall, but December 31st. Marc, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
You too. Marc Lee, Senior Economist for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And before we go to my next guest, who is speaking for local businesses in Langley, Terry is on the line in Vernon now. What do you think of the minimum wage increase, Terry?
I believe that all wages should increase as the cost of living does, not just minimum wage. And I believe all pensions should also increase, government pensions, and that's to a certain amount. Some pensions are larger than they need to be right now, I believe, and some kick in early. You can double dip. So yeah, I am all for wage increases to a certain extent.
Okay, Terry, thank you so much. So CPP contributions as well, federal CPP contributions. Thank you very much for the call from Vernon. Cory Redekop is the CEO of the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce and joins me now. Hi, Cory. Welcome back to the program.
Yeah, nice to see you. How you doing?
I am well. I imagine you heard the last few comments there from Marc Lee, who talked about, businesses, it doesn't impact them too much, and we don't necessarily see layoffs. In fact, we see perhaps investment in workers in order to be able to retain them for longer. What do you see as the impact on small businesses in Langley?
Yikes! Yeah, not sure where to start on that. Yeah, I mean, first, even your last guest was talking about windfall profits, and we got to make sure we rake in what Loblaws is. Are you kidding me? I mean, the majority of businesses in BC are small businesses who would love to eke out a tiny profit, let alone a windfall, and
Okay, they're
that's
two
what we're
different
talking
things, though.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're talking about. Is that
Right.
it's no one begrudges wages going up, and most of my members don't pay the minimum wage; they pay more than that. But I think when the minimum wage goes up 71% over 10 years, faster than any other economic metric, it creates inflationary pressure on businesses that aren't seeing a 71% increase in consumer spending to match. I mean, we're already the highest minimum wage of any province in Canada, but BC was the second worst in economic growth last year. So eventually, those two things we have to hit rubber on the hits for road, and those two things can't be true at the same time. We need if businesses are growing and we have a competitive economy, you're going to see wages going up, like your last caller said, anyways. Let alone with government getting involved. So it's really with the minimum wage. It's a 2.6 increase. That's not the problem. It's the 71% increase over the last 10 years. And it's that knock-on effect. No one seems to talk about what happens to the $19 an hour worker or the $22 an hour worker or the $33 an hour worker when the floor goes up. It then cascades across the entire wage scale. And businesses I say this every year. It seems it's been a tough year. It's been a tough 5 years for a lot of our businesses. And when you see wages being pulled up across the board, including for roles that were never meant to be impacted by the minimum wage, that hurts a lot of small and medium businesses who just can't absorb those costs the way that your last guest, the big corporations that he's concerned with.
Are there, though, those benefits to be able to keep those workers who are making higher than minimum wage, given those, as businesses have faced increases, so too have workers, right, in the cost of living, in the cost of their housing and their food?
No, absolutely, and I think the minimum wage was never meant to be a guideline on what should be paid. It's a tool used in specific circumstances, specific industries, often for entry level or
It's a
part-time role. It
floor,
wasn't
right?
designed to be a comprehensive income standard. Even the living wage advocates don't advocate for the minimum wage to jump to $27. And actually, the average wage in BC, which is perhaps a better metric, is $34.60. So as I said, most of my members aren't paying the minimum wage. If the average is $34.60, that means the average business isn't paying the minimum wage. So I think we just need to be aware of what we're talking about, and we understand that the minimum wage is meant to be a floor it's not meant to be a floor for all full-time work. It's for certain roles, and in some industries that market, that's what it can bear. In other industries it can bear more, and they regularly pay more. But it's for anyone who doesn't make a payroll or has not had to run a business. It's not just the 1785. It's the EI contributions on that, the CPP contributions on that. Your employer payroll it impacts your employer health tax. It impacts your workforce, your WorkSafe BC premiums. There's all sorts of if you offer benefits, there's all sorts of things that add on to this. So the actual wage, even at a minimum wage worker, isn't 1785. It's significantly more than that when all the things that an employer is actually responsible for gets added onto that. So we just like to see that people are considering and government's considering that, well, what's being done on the business side to make sure that our businesses are able to absorb this, because it doesn't do anyone a lot of good. We can make the minimum wage $100 if the businesses start to shut down or start to hire less. Well, it doesn't matter what the minimum wage is. We need to make sure that our business community, especially our small and medium business community, which drives our economy, is sustainable and can keep hiring. And I think you had an email or a call on there. I wasn't sure which one it was, talking about youth unemployment. We're in a generational challenge for youth unemployment. This summer is going to be dire. And what you don't do to solve that is make youth employment more expensive.
What do you mean by that? What's going to be dire about youth unemployment this summer?
Oh, if you look at the trends, there's Stats Canada coming out now with the trend lines for if you're someone who's in school and planning to go back to school in the fall, so your summer jobs for your college students, we are trending way below where we've ever been in the last 20 years, as far back as the data I've seen on job opportunities. Talk to anyone who's my age and younger trying to find those first jobs, like your caller was talking about, those first jobs, those foot in the door, they're fewer and far between. And it's because businesses are trying to figure out, as I said, this is a kind of a tough time. I used to hire 4 for this role. Maybe I'll hire 2 this summer. And that's the impact. So for those 2 people who didn't get that job, they don't really care what the minimum wage is. They'd rather have something.
Let me take a call now from Kirsten in Parksville. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi.
Hi, you're a bookkeeper for a small business?
I run an accounting and bookkeeping firm, and just to piggyback on what your guest really just said, I first of all, I want to say that I don't dispute that earning minimum wage. It's really tough to make a living that way, and I don't dispute the minimum wage going up. But I think it's really important that everyone does realize that employers, as your guest said, when minimum wage goes up, employers pay that minimum wage for the 10 days vacation, the 5 sick days, the 10 stats. So an employer actually pays an employee for 25 days out of the year that they do not work, and then the employer's share of the percentage of the CPP and the EI goes up as well. WCB goes up, employer health tax goes up, and so your guest is absolutely right that the minimum wage is just the base, and there's a lot of expenses that I think people don't realize just how much an employer does pay. I mean, 25 days out of the year that an employer is paying that employee to not work. That's pretty significant.
Kristen, good to hear from you. Thank you very much for your call. And Cory, in my last minute here, so, given the challenges that businesses face, what is a sustainable way to ensure that there is a reasonable floor for wages for workers?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll give credit to the government. It makes more sense on a policy position to be increasing the minimum wage tied to inflation as opposed to fits and starts where we suddenly see big jumps. But I think tying it to inflation as a guidepost to see do we need to increase it this year, and if we are, what are we doing? And maybe inflation's the ceiling, not. But I think there's other things that we can do. If you're looking to lift up people who are making minimum wage or low income workers, then why doesn't the government tackle that through the taxes that they take on those people, or tackle housing affordability, or let's get more childcare done for those people, or help them get beyond minimum wage work with training and programs so they can be upskilled and find other jobs, or help my members and my businesses be more successful and get out of the way so we can be more profitable, more successful, so that we can hire more. So there's lots of policy things we could do as opposed to maybe a blunt tool which just kind of raises the floor and then raises everything with it.
Cory, good to have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Cory Redekop, CEO of the Greater Langley Board of Trade. And we're getting more emails on this as well. As you've been hearing, BC's minimum wage has gone up to $17.85 an hour. Well, yesterday, CBC's Tanushi Bhatnagar asked people in Vancouver if they thought it would make a difference.
Change, I don't think it will have that much impact on anybody's life. So
that's good, but maybe that's not enough.
It's not a lot, it's not enough, but at least it will help.
If it increased by the dollars, for example, is 17 to 18 or 19, I think that would be preferred.
Meanwhile, Tanushi spoke to local business Vice President Nicole Burke with Emel's Catering and Westside Kitchen.
We want to give everybody as much as we can. And we also need to make enough to keep the lights on. If we're already operating at a razor-thin margin where we are just floating, we can't absorb it. But if we don't absorb it, we lose our client base.
Lots of thoughts on this one for sure. Randy writes, $20 per hour is the number. 25 is the number for bare bones affordable living. Small businesses can afford that by having skill sets of workers improve, eliminating the executives and having the middle managers lead the teams. Eliminate advertising if possible. That's from Randy in Burnaby. You can send more of your thoughts, bctoday@cbc.ca. And Ron writes as well, CPP, EI are deducted from the employee pay. So while the employer might remit these funds, they're not paid by the employer. They're paid by the employee, deducted from their minimum wage. That's from Ron emailing us. bctoday@cbc.ca is where you can reach us. It is now 12:30, and thanks for joining us here on the program. We are live on Radio 1, on CBC Television, live streaming as well. I'm Michelle Elliott. Good to have you with us. And coming up, I don't know if you went and visited the Bay downtown yesterday. Certainly lots of people did, and they lined up to get a piece of nostalgia, perhaps a bargain, but certainly to talk about the closure of the Bay. And so we're asking you, what does the closure of the Hudson's Bay Company mean to you? And what do you think should go in those empty spaces? We'll have that conversation coming up after this CBC News Update. And here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The RCMP and Kelowna are not releasing details about what appears to be a body in Okanagan Lake. Police have taped off a section of the walkway in City Park along the water. They have also put up large barriers to shield the public view. Police crews with dive equipment have been preparing to go into the lake. Prime Minister Mark Carney is meeting with Canada's premiers as they discuss possible infrastructure projects. Premier David Eby is not in attendance as he attends a trade mission in Asia. Deputy Premier and Attorney General Nikki Sharma is at the meeting instead. And the BC Wildfire Service says windy, dry conditions may challenge firefighting efforts at a so-called wildfire of note burning in northeastern BC. It says the fire, which has forced about 70 people from their homes in the Kelly Lake area, intensified yesterday due to strong winds in the afternoon. The Wildfire Service says helicopters are dropping water in areas today where the blaze is most active. And now the forecast on the north coast, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 13, highs up to 19 with increasing cloudiness in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly sunny with a high of 17, highs in the 20s with lots of sunshine this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly sunny with a high of 22. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny as well, with highs from 16 to 22 inland. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Rob. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And you're with BC Today. Now, you heard Robert talk there about the Prime Minister meeting with premiers from across Canada. Yes, Canada's top leaders are huddling in Saskatoon to meet with Prime Minister Mark Carney and discuss the projects that they would like to prioritize. Now, Premier David Eby was not there as he's off to a trade mission in Asia. And so BC Attorney General Nikki Sharma took Eby's place at the table. Now, Carney promised to slash federal approval times for major infrastructure projects, but Ottawa won't give everyone's proposal the go-ahead. And that could put the promise of unity between First Ministers to the test.
This meeting is about building a stronger Canadian economy, building one Canadian economy, and I really want to salute the leadership around this table. I can't keep up with the flurry of announcements of free trade agreements between provinces and across the country. The federal government will do its part, tabling legislation very shortly to eliminate federal barriers to interprovincial movement of goods and people, and also to put in place an ability to advance projects of national interest. And again, we have seen the leadership around this table of developing truly nation-building projects. And this is just the start. This is just the start. And it's what Canadians expect and what they deserve.
That is Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, that meeting will take place today and continue tomorrow. It is happening in Saskatoon, usually happens in Ottawa, but Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe invited the PM to Saskatchewan for this meeting. Well, after 355 years in business, the Bay Days are now over. The Hudson's Bay department store closed its doors for good yesterday after it filed for bankruptcy back in March. North America's oldest retail chain was founded in 1670. Now, in downtown Vancouver, the flagship location at Granville and Georgia had been operating for 138 years, and CBC caught up with some nostalgic shoppers there yesterday who waited for the doors to open one last time.
We live really close, so we have been coming here every day, sometimes twice a day.
What are the best deals?
The best deals was clothing. Clothing was incredible. I bought a sweater that was $150 for $9. Or my partner bought a pair of sandals that were $525 for $54. So those sales were incredible. I love the sales. I've been coming every day. But what about the employees? There are people who have been here for 30, I don't know, maybe more years, their lives, their livelihoods, and they're getting no severance. How can that be? It's pretty sad. It's sad to see it gone. I also think at the same time it's a white elephant. It's a dinosaur from the past. So maybe it's time for it to go. But I would like to see this building turn into like a community center or something for the people, not for business or for rich people. Turn it into a community center, do something with this. Bring artists here so we can see their art. Do it for the community, don't do it for the money.
We have to use the other shopping mall like Marshall or Winners or Zara, We have to use the other stores.
I don't know, it's just upsetting. Like, we were in Europe a couple of years ago and they had a bar there that was from 948 and it's still around, and I was just hoping that it would always still be here. It's a part of who I was and how I grew up.
Well, as for what will go into those Bay locations, last week, BC-based real estate investor Ruby Liu and her investment company Central Walk entered into a definitive agreement to acquire 28 locations of Hudson's Bay here in BC, Alberta, and Ontario. It's not clarified, though, which location specifically, so we don't know whether that includes downtown Vancouver. And the deal still has to go through landlord consents and court approval. Well, we're asking you today, what does the closure of the Bay mean to you? And what do you think should go into those former Bay locations? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Bruce Winder, retail analyst and author, and he's based in Toronto. Hello, Bruce. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the program again.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, you heard some of those comments there. It was part of how I grew up. What goes through your mind listening to people as they made their way to the Bay for one last time?
Yeah, it's sad, right? I went out too. I tried to get into a Bay yesterday. I couldn't get in because all the merchandise and fixtures were sold. There was just a jewelry section and you had to wait an hour. But you know what? It's a sad time. Each Canadian has their own story about their interaction with the Bay. A lot of people worked for the Bay. A lot of people shopped at the Bay or had relatives who worked there. We all have a different story, but the common denominator, I think, is that we're all a little sad, right? We realized it was dying. We saw it dying in front of our eyes. Yeah. But at the same time, when it finally goes, you just feel that sadness.
Absolutely. I have a friend who works at the Bay. I recall my own story. I arrived here when I was 12 and from the Philippines, so not a lot of cold weather clothes. And so my first foray into a store to get a winter coat was into the Bay. And I remember my mom giving me something way too thick, and I thought, that's too bulky, that's too bulky. But this was, my first entry into shopping in Canada was at the Bay. And I imagine so many people have those similar stories of going down with their families.
For sure. I mean, that's what it was, right? It was sort of, for a while there, it was kind of the everything store, right? Like, a lot of families would get up and that's their destination because they had reasonable priced product and they had a wide assortment and the quality was pretty good and you could trust it, for major appliances, sporting goods, toys, clothing, everything, right? It was like a true department store. A lot of those categories have faded away over the years, but you still can't, forget those stories.
That fading, I think, is what's happened. Can you tell me how we got from it being so integral in our lives to really the point where I don't recall when the last time was that I went into the Bay? What happened there?
Yeah, there's a few things that happened. I mean, probably the biggest thing is that the department store sector overall has been in decline. So, we used to have Eaton's, Simpson's, Sears, and they've all kind of went away. The Bay was the last one. Now, you can argue that Simons or Holt Renfrew is a department store, but it's different, right? And don't get me wrong, places like Walmart have departments, but they're lower priced, right? But we kind of faded away. They didn't really connect with younger generations. That's part of it. But also the ownership, it was bought by a private equity company, and they're really real estate experts, right? So they bought it probably to optimize the real estate, but they kind of didn't really do a great job, in my opinion, of optimizing the retail side, of reinventing themselves, reinvesting in it. They tried sometimes, but it just didn't work. They kind of got lost a bit. They started to buy retailers in Europe, and sort of the Bay was used as a bit of a cash cow to pay for other acquisitions. Meanwhile, they neglected it. So when you start to add all this up, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, we've really seen it fade away.
It's interesting. I'm just going to put out the numbers again because we have a caller who's going to talk about that a little bit. Our number again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Let us know, what does the closure of the Bay mean to you? And what do you think should go into those empty spaces now? Jillian is calling from Port Alberni. And what do you want to know about what happened? What led to the demise of the Bay, Jillian? Go ahead.
Well, your guest is probably the perfect person to ask about that. I mean, I have Bay-branded tote bags and Bay-branded Olympic mittens and scarves and stuff that I treasure.
Yeah.
But when did the Americans take ownership of the Bay, and what was the performance record of the Bay? You've touched on this briefly, under their ownership, and is it possibly, dare I say, in this environment, a deliberate move to remove Canada's largest department store, the oldest department store in the world, for heaven's sake?
You're talking about sort of the trade war and
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, this certainly preceded all of that. But yeah, Jillian, given the concerns around Canada's identity, what are your thoughts on that then, Bruce? Just first of all, the ownership question. Yeah.
Yeah, the ownership, it really changed hands in the late 2000s. So I think around 2007, it was bought by Jerry Zucker, who passed away. He was an American. And then in 2008, I believe it was bought by NRDC, which is the real estate company. Now, having said that, the Bay was suffering before that. So they were really struggling because the department store sector was in decline, probably since the late 90s, at least. Mid to late 90s is when they really started to decline. So that's kind of the timing as to what happened. In terms of it being intentional, I really don't think so. I think it was just a company that went in, saw a huge amount of real estate, said we can make a fortune off the real estate, and we'll try to sort of put some Band-Aids on the retail ops side to keep it afloat, but eventually those Band-Aids peeled off.
Oh. What a way to put it. I can almost see the paint peeling off the Bay. Thank you for that call. Faye writes us from Victoria, I will miss shopping at the Bay. It was my go-to place for most things. I like being able to be in one store instead of many small stores. What I would like to see is Simons from Quebec take up some of the spaces. It would really be nice to have a department store in the city. And she's writing from Victoria. There's the Simons in West Vancouver here. What is the difference? I hear we have someone saying, it's that mid-range department store, I guess is what you're talking about, Bruce. We have Simons, Holt Renfrew higher end, Walmart at the lower end. So is there demand? Or as you say, what led to the decline of the department store in its entirety?
Yeah, I think your guests, your listeners talked about it. It's sort of the value side of it. There was a time when the Bay and other department stores offered great value, and that was before Walmart came to town. Once Walmart came to town and people started to get a taste for what we call discount, Costco came to town as well, we started to see much lower pricing, and those department stores just couldn't cut it anymore. They have a higher cost base, so they started to go upscale a little bit, the remaining ones, and that alienated Canadians. Simons is a unique creature based in Quebec. They've done very well. You know, they've been very slow in their expansion. They do offer accessible products, but they have and they offer a lot of private label. They're smart. They have their own labels. They don't buy from a lot of brands, and they have incredible designs that are made in-house. So it allows them to make extraordinary margins, profit margins. And with the design, it really found a nice niche for Canadians who sort of like to dress. And they're very focused, right? Their products are more sort of soft home, you know, clothing, footwear. They're not into hard lines as much like the Bay used to be, you know, whether it was hardware or sporting goods or furniture or appliances.
Let's take some more calls now. Carmen is joining us from Williams Lake. Hi, Carmen. What was the closest bay to you?
Hi, good morning. It was Kamloops, so it was a 3-hour drive.
And did you make the drive?
Yes, and we would go on special occasions or Christmas shopping hour time. And so one son was like husky, big boned, and the other one was tall, thin, like a model. So it was hard to find clothes for them, and I found lots of brands that fit my youngest son.
At the Bay?
And yeah, definitely. And, you know, the Guess jeans, especially the Tommy Hilfigers and all those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and we're so heartbroken to go because there's like a variety of stuff we can buy from there, not only clothes. We shopped at all the other departments there.
Right. Could you have any more memories, perhaps even before you shopping for your own sons?
Myself, I always found great outfits, and I got many compliments. And also, I think I bought my son's first suit there as a little young guy. And he was like a, I don't know, I think he was like a escort for a flower girl at my cousin's wedding.
Yeah, that is where you go, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so they appeared at a couple of weddings, so I had to go to the Bay and pick up.
So what does it mean to you, Carmen, to have it be closed now?
Yes, it's so heartbreaking, and I'm not sure where we'll shop. So I'll just wait to see what comes up.
Yeah, right. I'm sure there's a bit of sadness and nostalgia that people are feeling. Thank you so much for the call, Carmen.
Oh, definitely. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. That's Carmen from Williams Lake, and Kamloops was the location that was closest at 3 hours away. Still, Carmen made the trip to shop for her sons. Robert is in West Vancouver now. Hi, Robert. What does the closure of the Bay mean to you?
Yeah, very sad. Yeah, we're seniors in West Van here, and we were in there often as well, and we finished most of our apartment when we moved with the Bay again. I wanted to talk about marketing with Bruce Neo. We were with Capital One. We got a statement every month. We paid it. We went in the store and impulse buyed a few things. Neo, can't pay your bill here. Online banking. You know how many seniors that knocked out? 3 or 4 million that day. That was the end of them. After Neo was like a bowling alley in there. You know, there was nobody in the stores, and seniors grew up with the Bay, and they just rejected them. We have an 8.5 credit rating. Neo turned us down. We were going to do human rights, but because it was a violation because of age, but we didn't. So very sad, very sad.
Yeah, it became cumbersome then for the seniors who did not use online banking and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Robert, that's a really interesting.
You couldn't even pay your bill there.
Yeah. Right, and you're there. Robert, that's a really interesting point. I can see Bruce nodding along as he's listening to you there. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that was one of the things that the Bay started to show its behaviors. It started to do silly things that alienated customers. It's sort of looking for short-term cost savings, looking to maybe optimize their balance sheet in the short run versus really, help customers and be customer focused. I think they lost a lot of that. And that often happens when you have a private equity company that buys a retailer. They start to do things in the short run to save cost, but they end up alienating consumers in the long term.
Yeah, and he brings up a good point that a lot of seniors grew up. They're the ones who grew up with the Bay and would be your most loyal demographic, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, David is calling from Nanaimo now with a memory at the Bay. Hi, David.
Hi. I thought you might enjoy the other side of the Bay, the trading side.
Yeah, Yes, go ahead.
I was working with the federal government in Baffin Island in Cape Dorset in the 1960s, and there was a Hudson's Bay post there. And to get to, we only had a one-way radio connection with the outside world, and to get to the radio telephone, you had to go up into the bay post, upstairs, and through lines and lines of gloriously white fox fur, all hanging.
Oh, wow.
Ready to go out in the shipping season.
And you were there in the 60s, were you, David?
Yes, mid-60s.
Wow. And so what do you make? I mean, do you have any thoughts about the evolution of the Bay from trader to retailer?
Well, I've certainly shopped lots at the Bay and have good memories of it. Very sad to see it go.
Yeah. David, thank you. I did enjoy that. Thank you very much for the call.
Cool. Yeah.
That is
You're welcome.
Yeah, it reminds you of the fur trading history, of course, of the Bay, Hudson's Bay Company. And so, Bruce, we hear now about this mogul, this real estate mogul, Ruby Liu, who has this agreement, a deal to acquire the lease for 28 locations, and we couldn't confirm whether that was specifically what locations there were, whether that included downtown Vancouver. What can you tell us about what she might bring to the table here?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting development. From what I know, Ruby Liu is a billionaire. She is originally from China. She bought and sold a number of businesses there. Ended up selling a mall in the Shenzhen area, which is the southern part of China, across from Hong Kong. And she has a lot of ideas which are kind of interesting. From what I understand, she wants to create a store that is a fusion of food, entertainment, product sales. She's talking about doing something that is multicultural, diverse, culturally diverse, and generationally diverse, so appealing to many different age groups. So it's quite interesting. I mean, I did some recon on her malls on the West Coast. She seems to really believe in events and excitement to bring people in. She does own 3 malls on the West Coast. So it should be fun. We're all waiting to see what she comes out with. Hopefully it's successful. We could use another retailer in Canada.
What do you think? Yeah, and what would you consider successful? You're right. It's got to appeal to different generations, and it's got to be diverse. What would you see as a successful formula?
I really don't know. I mean, none of us really know. I think something you need something that drives people in. So it has to be, great value and great excitement. It has to be multi-generational, because otherwise you'll alienate, you'll alienate other generations. Especially you need the millennials now and the Gen Z. That's a guarantee. And you have to make money, right? So you have to find a way to work backwards so that you can make a reasonable return on the investment. And, I think she has some ideas out there, but we're yet to see a prototype, or we're yet to hear in detail what her strategy is. So it should be interesting.
Well, we have another trip down memory lane ahead of us now. Kim is calling from Vancouver. Hi, Kim. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. I just wanted to share, I grew up in that store. I grew up in Vancouver. My dad was the display manager at the Bay for years and years and years.
Oh, wow.
I remember the whole top floor used to be the executive offices and the display department. It was giant. And that was back in the day when they had really museum quality displays in the front windows.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, that's iconic to think about, the holiday displays and just the way they lit up the street, right?
Yeah, really, truly. It was a great place to be a kid and have your dad work there too. I'll tell you that. Obviously, I'm a shopper there, but I just have memories of being a little girl running up and down those stairs and walking into that display department with, a giant letter A and bolts of fabric and glitter and glistening and giant Christmas things. And I'm really sad to see it go.
Wow, I feel like I was just brought into a holiday movie or something.
Yeah. Hallmark.
Yeah, Hallmark movie. Kim, is there a specific display, a particular display that stands out for you?
The display that I remember once was because my dad told me about making it, and they had individually placed dry grass stems into a carved fake foam ground. It was to do with settlers and obviously selling Bay products like the Bay blanket. But it was really old-timey, and I thought that was really cool.
Individual pieces of grass. Kim, thank you so much for taking us down your memory lane. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That's Kim in Vancouver, and we have an email here as well from Vanessa in Vancouver. Vanessa writes, I worked at 4 different bays from 2002 to 2018, from Richmond to Brampton to Scarborough to Vancouver. I've met so many incredible co-workers throughout that time. It makes me incredibly sad to see the bay close their doors. What I would like to see go into the bay is something like an Eataly, like they have in New York City and Chicago. So Eataly is a sort of, I guess, like a department store with food and different food outlets, I guess, as well, right? You can order some takeout food there. So interesting idea and lovely to think about the workers. Why don't we end on that? What does this mean for the thousands of workers at the Bay, Bruce? Where do they go?
Yeah, it's really sad. It's probably one of the saddest parts of the story is you have, 8,300 workers who technically lost their job yesterday, and there's no severance package, right? And some of them have been working there for a long time. You can apply for a government subsidy, one time 8,300, I think $8,000, but that's really sad that they have that. And there's going to be another, I believe, 1,000 workers who are going to lose their job over the next month. So it's really sad about that. There's a lot of suppliers too who haven't been paid. Let's not forget that, the Bay owes $1.1 billion, and they kind of left a lot of people high and dry, whether it's landlords or suppliers, and some of them are small suppliers. So it's sad that such an iconic company is sort of leaving us with such a dark cloud over its head.
Yeah, kind of ending with a whimper as it goes. Yeah. And speaking of, someone wrote about Eataly. Randy writes, the food court, the food floor. Yes, remember that? So many types of food. The cheeses alone were worth the trip. Yeah, I do remember that, Randy. Fun. Thank you very much. Bruce, you are the perfect guest for this. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Bruce Winder is a retail analyst and author, and he joined us from Toronto. It is now just about 1 o'clock, and some people have really a lot of ideas. Someone wrote in saying they should be the bays should be turned into retirement homes. Janet writes as well, make the lower and main floors Vancouver's second sorely needed indoor swimming pool, a recreation center, perhaps some housing and retail. So there you go. Lots of ideas being tossed around what to do with the empty bay.